The Trump administration's war on the Constitution has been going so well that he decided to take it to the next level. Yes, the one war in which Trump doesn't want to surrender or capitulate right before victory is the war on what made America great in the first place. It's limited government. So yeah, Trump, the latest casualty of this is Jimmy Kimmel, who was fired by ABC for some stuff he said about the murder of Charlie Kirk. Now, you would think, what does that have to do with anything? ABC firing Jimmy Kimmel, that's a private company, right? Yes, but even in the United States of America, there's private companies, are subject to sometimes the whims of politicians, and in this case, very, very much so. So after uh, what seems to be very strong pressure from the Trump administration, this was the result. Remember, after Colbert, it was announced that Colbert's show will be going off the air, Trump said that Jimmy Kimmel is next. That alone, the very statement from a president should terrify everybody. It apparently didn't terrify, people who don't like what some people on the left say and are happy to see them go away, but by whatever means. Welcome to the Daily Objective. I'm Razi Ginsburg. I'm joined by James Valiant. James, your initial thoughts on what's going on here? Is it really a violation of the First Amendment? Let's put it that way.
Well, the Supreme Court would tell you that it's not a violation, that this is the sad state that America has reached, frankly. And Supreme Court precedent in the whole course of my lifetime, and you can add a couple more decades beyond earlier than that, the Supreme Court has unfortunately dropped the ball very badly and repeatedly. Um, you, First, let me just get this out of the way. What Jimmy Kimmel said was patently absurd. What's amazing to me, if I just make this comment and get it out of the way so we can then talk about the censorship issue, he goes out and says that the guy who shot Charlie Kirk, the biggest MAGA supporter among young activists, was shot by a MAGA guy. Now, talk about a psychological need. I mean, the left really is having a hard time confronting their own actions in calling for censorship, their own actions in defending violence. And that had nothing to do with creating the atmosphere. Peter Schwartz had a marvelous article several years ago about this, by the way. There's no doubt that the culture and atmosphere of encouraging violence is increased, and it is increased. The term microaggression, for example. Words are not aggressions. They're not even microaggressions, okay? And when you start talking like that, what you're doing is you're confusing language and words and force. Toni Morrison, the famous writer, for example, said hate speech is violence. Now, the left has been confusing force and words for a long time, and that has led to, is it okay to punch a Nazi, for example? All that has contributed to it. Now, I distinguish the shooter from those who are creating this atmosphere. But what Jimmy Kimmel said was absolutely absurd. It was a psychological evasion of any responsibility on the part of the left for what happened. And it didn't even occur to him that maybe the guy was not MAGA who shot one of Trump's biggest supporters. It didn't even occur to him. Or a guy whose partner is trans. That motivation doesn't play in. So, as awful as what Jimmy Kimmel said, he has a freedom of speech to say that. Of course, he does. He can say there's no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. Thank goodness. There is, in fact, there's no misinformation exception to the First Amendment. Jimmy Kimmel can go out there, lie, say whatever he wants. Okay, that is perfectly protected. If it were just private business, if it were just a question of these ABC affiliates pressuring the network to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel, that would be a purely economic decision. Jimmy Kimmel has no right to that job. He can face the social consequences. In this sense, cancel culture is perfectly okay. The social media, it's so funny how the shoe is now on the other foot with the left. When the right was saying that, oh, well, social media is censoring us, the left would say, oh, these are private companies. They can make their own decisions, et cetera, et cetera. But you know, the very existence of economic regulations, now let's get to the censorship question. The very existence of economic regulations is a threat to free speech. Let me just say that. And only objectivists really understand this and understand the inherent relationship between economic regulations, economic rights, and civil rights and civil liberties. They're intimately connected. Every economic regulation, whether it's an antitrust law, a tax law, can be used as extortion against a media company. And just a little while back, we had the case of social media companies, men like Mark Zuckerberg saying, I was pressured by the government. The Supreme Court refused to hear that case. I forget, what was it, 2 years ago? Supreme Court refused, just knocked the claim out. Nope, economic threats of coming down on you for antitrust purposes are not producing this chilling effect on free speech, when of course they are. The FCC is a new move, though. Here we see Trump not using general extortion like the Biden administration did to get social media companies to say what they wanted them to say. That, in my view, is censorship. Any economic regulation that's used as extortion is a form of government censorship. The FCC, now, the history of this here, when radio broadcasting began in the 1920s, the federal government, in effect, stole the airwaves, made them public property, and said you can only operate a TV or a broadcast frequency. See, cable news is regulated by this, but the FCC came into being in due course and said you can only broadcast in the public interest. Ayn Rand was on this before I was born. In 1962, she wrote an article, Have Gun, Will Nudge. Now, that's a really excellent title, and it brilliantly summarizes the relationship here between economic regulations and the necessary connection to censorship. Ayn Rand understood that the FCC was inherently a dangerous thing to the First Amendment. She understood that back in 1962 in her article, which I urge everyone to read, Have Gun, Will Nudge. And of course, the funny thing is that Trump's own FCC guy said in 2019, FCC doesn't exist to politically censor people. And now, of course, recently, the ABC, ABC is the network, right? And they put out content. The local broadcasters are the ones who actually license the airwaves in their local areas. A group of affiliates, of local affiliates, because they're conglomerates of affiliates, was trying to do a merger with another affiliate conglomerate. They needed FCC permission to do this. And so when you hear that the ABC affiliates were pressuring ABC, it could well be, and it seems that there's a fair case on the face of it, they were trying to appease the FCC in order to get approval of this economic merger deal. And to do that, we want to appease Trump's FCC guy. And Trump's FCC guy said, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Now, what the hell does that mean? That is an absolute threat, a threat of government force being applied to a broadcaster to get rid of this guy. So as stupid, absurd, and deplorable as whatever Jimmy Kimmel said, and I think he is an idiot, and I mean, he was just the pollution on late night TV. That's my opinion. On the other hand, however bad or absurd what he said was, nonetheless, he has every right to say it. And if his firing came from FCC pressure, which there is good evidence now to see, came from, as you point out, it came from Trump. It came from the FCC. We can do this easy way, the hard way. There was this merger that was pending, FCC approval that they were. But as I say, the Supreme Court badly dropped the ball a couple of years ago and dissociated economic regulations and the threat of using them from extortion on speech and media companies. Now Trump has taken it to the next level and is directly using the Federal Communications Commission, which licenses broadcasters, to threaten ABC if they don't have the correct speech on. There is no misinformation exception to the First Amendment. And what I'm hearing a lot from the right is, well, it's so false and it's so incendiary, what Jimmy Kimmel said. No, that is not the business of the government. And it is certainly not the business of anyone to force a broadcaster not to say things that are misinformation and incendiary, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah.
I find this to be an extremely disturbing turn of events in the sense that we haven't yet grasped, and this is something only Ayn Rand really it can give you the good answer here on. The relationship between economic regulations and free speech cannot be separated. Cannot be separated. The FCC is inherently dangerous to the First Amendment. And here we can see the danger rising in our lifetime. It's terrible how it goes tit for tat now.
Yeah.
We'll
And
pressure
that's
them, you pressure them, and Trump has stepped it up in effect on the
Yeah.
pressure.
And that's an important point here. First of all, the point about, what Jimmy Kimmel said is wrong. I think that's an irrelevant point here. I mean, because that's what free speech is. It's completely irrelevant what's being said, unless you are inciting to violence, it's completely irrelevant. And this exact point, by the way, of what is it that he said? Something about playing politics with the murderer, or something like that.
In their
When
desperation to
he
deny that he's MAGA,
but the
they're
right
deny that he's one of their own, is the
I
way he
I
put it.
was I was looking at Twitter. I think this was before it was confirmed that Charlie Kirk had died, and after he was shot, and there was this guy who was arrested and then released, and social media is flooded with information supposedly about who this guy is and what he did and how he's the murderer. So yeah, Jimmy Kimmel did what the right does all the time, the left does all the time. It doesn't matter. I mean, that's what free speech is. It's not that free speech is your right to say that which has been proven in a court of law, that which the government approves of. No, free speech is you have the right to express any view, and government can never come after you for that. That's so again, does
Absolutely
not
correct.
matter what he said. Now,
When it came
remember
to the
that
killing
Trump,
of Charlie Kirk, what Charlie Kirk said doesn't matter. And so we
yeah,
complain about well, although I disagree him with as a preface, that was murder. When we are talking about disagreeing with what Kimmel says, it's rather important. I would say that's not irrelevant because what he's being done, what is happening to him, is censorship in effect from the government. And so I only make my point that I disagree with Jimmy Kimmel in the sense that he has an absolute right to say it, whatever, however absurd on the face of it it might be. It's his freedom of speech. And indeed, right, he doesn't have a right to have a job at ABC. Of course not. ABC can fire him. But if that firing is the result of economic pressure coming from Washington, from the government, it is absolutely censorship.
oh
That's
yeah,
why I think we had to put all those dots together in that way. So, but I agree with you in principle. It is irrelevant. The content of his speech is absolutely irrelevant unless he is actually inciting immediate violence. That's the way it ought to be. Unfortunately, in my country, the land where free speech is supposed to be best protected, it is through the insidious means of economic regulations. And that is why both sides are hypocrites. That is why both sides are contradictory. Both sides have now, this is what's so sad about Trump in so many ways. He's adopted the socialist policies of the left. He's
yeah.
adopted a lot of the,
Yeah, I wanted to get to that. Thank you, Enric, for the super chat. Enric says the Democrats are introducing a bill against politically motivated attacks on citizens like the FCC on Kimmel. I don't know what that means. I don't know. That's the thing. Anybody who thinks the Democrats are going to save them from Trump's war on speech are forgetting that less than a year ago, a Democrat was in the White House and was doing the exact same thing in different ways. But yeah, he was calling social media and telling them, people are saying that they're not vaccinated and criticizing the Black Lives Matter riots and so the left was attacking people and they invented this thing, hate speech. And now the right, we talked about this yesterday, right? Now the right is talking about hate speech in the context of Charlie Kirk. So
that's it.
I also want to differentiate between what happened here, and I see all these reports about, somebody celebrated Charlie Kirk's murder on social media and was then fired. I love that. When that
Yeah.
happens, that's beautiful. I fully understand why when somebody celebrates the murder of someone for their views, or the murder of someone, period, you do not want them working for you. But this is different. This is the government telling you you can't do that as government. You can't force a private company to fire someone for their views. And again, this is a broadcaster. There were threats to do with the what was it, an acquisition by Nexstar of another company,
Right.
and yeah, that is a that by the way, again, that is I saw somebody saying here it's time for the right to fight back. The right is the left. There's no difference. They're not fighting back. They're fighting with them. They're fighting with them against the citizens. They're fighting for more government overreach, and whoever is in power, it doesn't matter. They're gonna pick up where the other side left off and continue. They're not gonna, backtrack and say, you know what? This is too much government overreach. We shouldn't be telling people what to say. It's going to be no. The Democrats are going to be like, yeah, the things that Republicans didn't like, that's fine. You can say that. But the things that Republicans do like, you can't say that.
Well,
Thank you,
that's
Wanda, for the
exactly it.
super chat.
If you want to fight your political opponents, words, you use words. Okay? If you think that the right or the left should fight back, push back, whatever your political view is, what are you fighting back with? If you're fighting words, you may only use words. Okay? There's a huge difference between words and force. And the government is force. That when the government injects itself, that is not fighting back with words. That's ripping your opponent's tongue out. That is silencing him. That's a threat to free speech. The sad irony here is that if Charlie Kirk was a martyr to free speech, whatever you think of his opinions, then this is a really sad coda. This is a pathetic coda. You know, you're going to follow it up with censorship. That would really betray the whole idea that Charlie Kirk was a martyr to free speech. Yeah, I'm all in favor of private canceling. If I don't want to be your friend, if I don't like what you're saying, I can kick you out of my living room. If we at the Ayn Rand Center UK don't want to have on some communist or Nazi or some vile Islamist, it is your right, Razi. You run this channel. This is Ayn Rand Center UK's channel. It can decide, and it's not censorship, folks. It's not censorship if Razi says, no, we're not going to have this guest on. Okay? That is your private freedom of speech, your private freedom of association, protected, I once thought, by the First Amendment to the US Constitution. On the other hand, when the government starts using extortion, threats of economic regulation, whether it's antitrust laws, which the Biden administration implicitly was using to jawbone Facebook and X, or whether it's the FCC. Now, the FCC is taking it up a notch. So Trump is using the left's former tactics, only he's now actually stepped it up a notch with his FCC guy saying, the economic regulator of broadcasters saying, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. So what's the hard way? But it's obviously the threat of pulling their license, their broadcast license, because they object to what Kimmel said. That is government censorship. It's a government censorship, whether it's done directly through censorship laws or done behind the scenes by saying, well, it would be a shame if your FCC licenses got pulled, or it would be a shame if we had to file that antitrust suit, and then get the broadcaster or the social media platform to comply with the kind of speech you think you want. So we've reached a sad state when it's censorship depending on, from a certain angle, depending on who's in power. No, censorship has to cross all ideological lines, all ideological. It is the speech you disagree with most that you should be out there defending. As Ayn Rand said in her amazing defense of pornography as free speech, she wrote an article in the 1970s called Censorship, Local and Express. I would also urge people to go look at it. Ayn Rand found hardcore porn to be disgusting. And she said, the fact that I find hardcore porn disgusting is what exactly motivates me to come out of the woodwork and say it has freedom of speech, absolute freedom of speech under the First Amendment. Ayn Rand defended the speech of people she thought was disgusting. And please read your article, Censorship Local and Express. The government has no business even influencing, pressuring, much less the kind of economic extortion that we've now seen under both the Biden and Trump administration. And what we're seeing here is the Trump administration actually stepping it up a notch, directly using the FCC and threats, veiled or not so veiled threats about pulling their license, doing this the easy way or the hard way, coming from Trump's own regulator of the broadcast airwaves. That is unspeakable. If the two
Wow.
are, if it, that is what pans out, it turns out that there was pressure from the White House and the FCC that made the difference to these ABC affiliates. That is censorship being taken to a new level here in the land of liberty, land where you're supposed to have freedom of speech, the United States. And the Supreme Court, in rejecting the case against the Biden, badly dropped the ball. And now it's going to happen more and more on both sides. Prediction.
Um, Thank you, Bonnie, who says perfect thumbnail. This is the, I think, second time in history that that's a Razi created well, Razi and ChatGPT, of course, created thumbnail. Somebody in the chat came in early on with lots of all caps saying Ilhan Omar lies on citizenship, massive $100 million fraud, jihadists who can do no wrong. I don't know what you're talking about. Welcome to the channel. But yeah, if you think because we are criticizing Trump's war on the US Constitution, that means we're with jihadists. You really have no idea what America actually is.
Ilhan Omar is a vile human being. She lies all the time. But I would rush in to say that we can't know the truth unless there's free speech. It plays a critical role in having information available to us. And for that very reason, the lies are protected speech in most cases. You can say Ilhan Omar lies, lies, lies. Well, guess what? There's no misinformation exception to free speech and the First Amendment, nor should there be. It is false ideas that we should, in fact, allow. John Stuart Mill said it in On Liberty back in the 1800s. You want the idiot to have free speech. It exposes him as an idiot. It sharpens our arguments if you're on the other side, uh, etc. It is in the exchange of ideas that our actual knowledge progresses as human beings. You cannot, in fact, it interferes with knowing. Censorship interferes with our ability to objectively know, is the way I would put it.
Yeah.
Mill didn't even put it this way. It interferes with our ability to actually know. And so, yeah, Ilhan Omar may be a liar, and she is a despicable jihadist. But guess what? No matter how vile or despicable someone's words are, they are just words. And please learn the difference between words and force.
Yeah. Tenebris makes a comment that I'm not going to read, but thank you for the mental image. And me not reading it is not censorship, unless Trump or Starmer didn't tell me what to do here. Bonnie says, "Thanks, James, for linking economic controls with speech control." Yeah, again, that is what this is. I mean, this is not if you had a free market in the U.S., a truly free market, if you had pure capitalism, this could not happen. And somebody says, "I think the board was waiting for any excuse to fire him. This just happened to be it. Bunch of cowards." Maybe I've seen this elsewhere, but we'll never know. It doesn't matter at this point if that was the
Yes.
case, and the
Ooh.
people who are criticizing mostly ABC for this, uh, this is not on them. This is on the people who are threatening them. Just like if Facebook, people were making fun of the verified by independent fact checkers. I made fun of it as well. But the bottom line is if Facebook was getting calls, as Zuckerberg has said, from people in the Biden administration telling them what to do, how to run their company, it's not on Facebook, it's on the people with the guns.
Exactly. And you said something that is worth $1 million. We'll never know. It is true that those network late night shows were their ratings sucked. And it may be that it was a matter of the affiliates all on their own. But these affiliates just so happened to be involved in an economic merger proposal that required the government to approve it. So we will never really know for sure what pressure it was. And maybe we will have some better evidence. I'm not saying we won't get more evidence on this, but the mere fact of the economic pressure being able to be applied is a kind of implicit extortion that we may never really understand the insidious impact of. Rights are a unity. The only way to enforce your civil liberties, your freedom of speech, your freedom of religious exercise, is by means of property rights. Absent property rights, your civil liberties, your freedom of speech is pretty meaningless. If the government owned and controlled all of the media outlets, that would be de facto censorship. There's only one way. You cannot separate out private property from any other right, because private property is the means by which we implement all of those other rights. It's my microphone, my living room, my YouTube channel, my broadcast station, and my decisions are not censorship at all. And the very existence of economic regulations, any economic regulations, whether they're antitrust laws or FCC licensing laws, pose a threat to free speech. Rights are a unity. A threat to any one, see, and that's not the way, unfortunately, the Supreme Court looks at it. It's this right versus that right, and this right is in conflict with that right. Economic liberties are given a much lower standard of review, all made up by the Supreme Court in the last, 80 years or so, is this notion that economic liberty, government just needs a rational justification when it's an economic, but no, if there's strict scrutiny when it comes to so-called fundamental rights. This division of rights into different cubbyholes and categories is corrupt. It is wrong. It is not the way James Madison and Thomas Jefferson thought of the Bill of Rights at all. Rights are a single unity. Any threat to any aspect of your freedom, from coercion, state coercion or criminal coercion, any violation of any of those rights poses a threat to all of them, to all of them. The only way to implement your right to privacy, your right to freedom of speech, your right to religious free exercise is through property rights. You can't have one without the other. And it works both ways.
Paul asks, Razi, did you get my X post on the lines in Gaza? I saw it, haven't clicked the video yet, but we are going to talk about the real line of Gaza in today's episode of the reality show. Keir Starmer is taking a brave stance right after Trump leaves and recognizing a Palestinian state after enough other leaders have done so. That is the topic of today's episode of the reality show. Parting thoughts, James?
Please pick up an Ayn Rand book if you haven't already. Both sides are a threat to all of our liberties. And you don't want to both sides it like that. A Trump administration has stepped it up a notch. But this point about economic liberty and civil liberty between free speech and property rights is the key one here, is vital here. So I would urge you, please, get your philosophical premises checked and learn the relationship, what freedom is, what coercion is, what a rights violation is. And here you can do no better than Ayn Rand's own essays, Man's Rights, The Nature of Government, Collectivized Rights. The articles I mentioned, Have Gun, Will Nudge, where she criticized the FCC in 1962, or in the 1970s when she defended pornography's right to freedom of speech, censorship, local and express. We are free speech absolutists, but we can only be that because we're also defenders of laissez-faire capitalism and individual property rights.
Yeah.
I'm James Stevens Valiant. You can find me at Facebook, where I answer questions almost every single day. And of course, I'm here at the Ayn Rand Center UK, where you'll get a
I've
unique perspective on all of these things.
I've said in the past, philosophically, we're running on fumes. People don't actually understand why we need to have even the, elements of freedom that we do have and people support. I don't think people necessarily understand why they should support it. But, the results of a good philosophy can be seen in people and their accomplishments. And I don't think there's ever been a better gathering of such people than we're going to have next month in Orange County, October 25th, 26th. The most successful objectivists on the planet who are really changing the world are going to be there. and you should too. Objectivism.co.uk. That is the link where you can get your tickets. Maybe I'll do a longer sales pitch on the reality show, but we are out of time. Thanks, James. Thanks, everybody, for watching. The reality show starts in a couple of minutes.
Be safe.